Right guys, I'm going to do a quick video on my LMU force feedback settings. Now, the settings here, I believe, are what comes standard, right? So we have the coefficient and the saturation at 10%, we have the collision strength and curb pull strength at 100, and if you're on a Fanatec wheel, which I'm on a DD2, I don't think these settings are going to be too good for you, because like R Factor, with the settings like that, I found that the steering was very bumpy. Let's do a lap, and the reason I've come to Spring was purposely to show, Spring is a bumpy track, and I want to kind of show the, not just the impact on the curbs, because the curbs here are quite high, but also the ground. The ground is incredibly bumpy, and I think as part of the FFB collision piece, it's like high frequency spiking of the FFB, which is similar to what ground impacts are going to have, and maybe to a point what curb impacts are going to have. But let's see, and I expect this to be quite an unpleasant experience. But let's kick it off anyway and just see kind of, what this is like. So this is the default out of the box, which I wasn't a big fan of. And I can feel it. So the bumps here are just so intense that it's almost like overpowering the car. And then the saturation coefficient and those two coefficient settings are kind of dampening a lot of the wheel. It's like something's in the way, preventing the actual car feedback to come through, and all I can feel here is just bumps and like road interaction. The wheel is alive, but it's not really giving me much information. The curb, coming off the curb, is very sharp. Yeah, not great. Let's finish the lap and then I'll jump back to the pits and I'll do my updated settings, if you like, the ones that I aimed for once I've seen those options in the menu, having come from R Factor 2 and having, a couple of issues. And the curbs are just awful to go over. Every bump is just exaggerated in the... I mean, look at the wheel, like... It's just... Like, yeah, it's going to bounce a little bit for sure, but it just feels exaggerated. And I daren't hit a curb the wrong way because I value my hands, to be perfectly honest. There's just a lot of... There's a lot of background stuff happening. Like, all I can feel is very sharp ground bumpiness, and it's just not great, to be perfectly honest. But again, with some FFB settings, it can be fixed. Man, I need to practice to bring a bit more. Oops, wrong corner. Okay, let's do the last corner, because that is a bumpy bastard, isn't it? Okay. Like, the wheel, I can already feel like the sharpness of intensity just while we're on the straight. And coming into the last corner, I mean, Jesus, the whole rig is shaking. I don't know if you can catch that on camera. Yeah. I just can't feel the car, right? But I knew that was going to happen, so no big deal. Let us jump back to the garage and fix that mess, right? So into settings, into controls, into force feedback. And what I want, like the steering coefficient, kind of, I don't know if you can see it there, but it adds a little bit too much damping and deadness into the wheel, right? So you want a little bit, I find, but I think by default it's probably too much, and just bear with me, the menu is just a little bit slow. So feedback strength at 60, smoothing on 1, like nothing has changed there. So let's just scroll down once the menu gets back to life. Okay, so these resistance coefficients are bring down to 3%. Now what I gather, this is the resistance on the wheel. Like, look, it's a bit freer now compared to a minute ago, which I don't know if, again, you can pick it up maybe on the overhead camera. And then the resistance, the saturation of that resistance, again, I just lowered to 3%. I want a little bit there, but not too much, and the wheel is a lot more free now. The key thing is, I don't want anything artificially resisting the wheel, right? I want the car to give me all the information, but I'm okay to have a teeny bit. 3% is good for me. Collision strengths, I bring this all the way down to, I think, like 28% or something like that. So let's go ahead and lower that down to 28. The curb vibration, I had got at 1% yesterday, but to be honest, leaving it turned off, there's no real difference in the FFB, so rather than introduce extra noise, I'll just leave that at 0, and then the curb pull strength we'll bring down to 28 as well. Now, I may go lower than this over the next few days, right? But this is an okay starting point for me. This is coupled with my Fanalab profile, which let me just move on to the Fanalab profile now, just to show you where we Fanatec Fanalab and the tuning menu. And let me just swap a screen here. So let's show the top screen. Yeah. And let me just move the OBS thing out of the way for a second. So here's my settings in Fanalab, right? So I have the overall FFB at 48%, just adjust that to your liking. For the LMP2 car and for the GTEs, I go with 48 in Fanatec. In the game, I always leave it at 60, just to keep it low enough to avoid clipping. But then when I go into like a hypercar that has like lighter steering, I'll take this 48 up to about 60, 65-ish, depending. Set to peak, because we do want peak forces coming through. Natural damper, friction and inertia all set to off, and then the interpolation filter in Fanalab set to 1. This is just a very... It's a fast-acting smoothing filter, so if you get spikes in the FFB, it will just take the peaks off a little bit and make it feel... make the steering wheel feel a bit more rubbery in your hand, because it's tires we're driving on after all, not steel rims. Everything else, effect intensity, effect strength, and all of that's at 100%. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Right, so let's hide that top screen and jump back to LMU with those changes having taken place. Just wait for my 3 monitors to come back to life. There we go. And so they're at 28%. Let me just make sure they have saved. Just double check everywhere with controls. Just double check everything. Force feedback. And they should be indeed at 28%, yeah. So it has. I just want to double check that it's saved. And the reason I'm doing that, by the way, is just because this game is pre-release. There's possibly a few little bugs and things that might not save in, but these have saved fine. So we're all good to go. So 3% for the saturation and coefficients, and then 28% on the curb and the impact strength. So same test again. And we can feel the coefficient is less immediately, so I'm able to turn the car a little bit more free, but it's still, we're rolling on tires, so it's not completely, freewheeling itself, but I do notice a small difference. But I'd say I'll notice the biggest difference when we actually get out on track and those bumps and curbs are not as bad. Yeah, so the bumps are really reduced in their intensity, and I can feel more of the car now and less of the bumps. Now, as I was saying, I may reduce that 28% even further, but I can still feel the road, I can still feel the bumps, but the difference is now it's not taking control of the wheel the way it was before. I can still feel them, they're still a bit sharp, but as I said, they're reduced to the point where the signal that is coming through is a more useful signal, i.e. the car itself. Now you could argue being Spring, it's still a little bit aggressive, which is why I might even change it further, but versus the, let's say, the default 100%, this is a big improvement. Certainly I find it to be. Yeah, and you can probably see that, like, I'm not struggling when I hit the curb as much. Like, yeah, I still feel it, but it's not those massive dangerous spikes the way it was in R Factor. it's actually not too bad to drive. Like it's decent. It's probably like arguably a little bit sharp still on this particular track, which, you know, spring being spring, you kind of expect. But the key thing is we can actually feel the car movement, which in R Factor 2, and try as I might, I was just never able to dial out the curbs. Like I was in the controller files, like making a few changes, and I got it to a place that felt pretty decent, but you know, I just gave up after long enough because like why bother. But the good news is in LMU, for Fanatec driver, for Fanatec racers among us, these settings seem pretty decent, and yeah, I mean, I'm not having to worry about the wheel snapping away. Now there is bits here that will be bumpy, right, but that's okay because it is spring. But the key thing is it's dialing down the crap, the noise, just the random spikiness that we used to get, and I can actually feel the proper loading of the car, and yeah, and I can still feel when I'm about to lose it as well, so but you get the idea, right? So if you're on a Fanatec wheel, try those settings, and if you feel it's too strong, and bear in mind we're at spring, right, so this is probably, you know, the ultimate test for this. But I guarantee you, you go to, you know, Spa, Portimao, any of those, the curb interactions will be a lot smoother, a lot more enjoyable, because, let's be honest, taking curbs is part of the fun of a racing game, isn't it? Like, you're feeling that you're on the limit and all of that. It just adds to the experience. So, give those settings a go, let me know what you think, and as I said, if you think that even at 28% it's a little bit too high, feel free to, you know, to dial it back a little. The force effect intensity sliders in Fanalab should be also connected to those curb strengths. So essentially, it's the effect of the force feedback and how strong it is and how intense it is, i.e. the sharpness. One thing that you could try is maybe dialing that down to maybe 80%. It's something I've done in Automobilista 2 and ACC. I think I'll dial it down a teeny bit. I haven't done it in LMU. I don't think I really needed to. But again, as a starting point, I would adjust those sliders in the game first as the starting point, and go from there. Hopefully this helps you guys if you're on a Fanatec wheel. Like I say, it's a game changer for me. I used to hate RF2. Like, I played a bit of it, but I hated it at the same time because I could never get it the way it should have been. And you'd hear online all of the RF2 kind of fanboys and stuff, and I mean that respectfully, right? They love the game. That's totally okay. I get it. But saying that the FFB is the best in the world, and I was like driving it and just thinking, no, like it isn't. Like, this is not how a car feels, and even if a car doesn't feel this way, as a sim, I don't know what I should be feeling. All I'm feeling is bumps, and I'm risking my wrists every time I crash, and it's just crazy stuff. But in LMU, that seems to be sorted, and then even fixed with those other settings. So thankfully, me on a Fanatec wheel, I'm actually really enjoying this game, and I can see this being my main game, to be honest with you. Like, I've driven ACC for years, big AMS2 fan. I think that's a great sim as well, but the potential, I think, for LMU is difficult to argue with, isn't it? You know, now they've got this Fanatec shit sorted, anyone with a Fanatec wheel with a few settings are able to actually enjoy and have fun. That opens up a huge amount of players, because, you know, Fanatec is obviously the most popular wheelbase out there. They ship thousands of units, like, compared to the competition. Whether that's good or bad, don't know, but the point is they ship way more than the competition, and now there's a fix for those Fanatec players to actually go and drive this with a few settings changes and have fun. Because I think, just rounding this out, not to harp on too long, but when I downloaded LMU yesterday, or yeah, the day of release, after like an hour and a half, I thought this is crap, because I couldn't feel the car. You know, the usual stuff, the usual problems that I was having here. But since making those changes, giving it a proper go, I'm really enjoying the driving physics. But yeah, give it a go, guys. Let me know what you think, and hopefully, if you're on a Fanatec base, this helps you. Just finally, the benefit of this change too, by the way, right, is that if you just load this game up and you get all this road noise, your tendency is to turn down the overall FFB so you don't injure yourself, right? But by toning those curbs and stuff like that down, it allows you then to crank up the actual FFB, because you're protected. The curbs are not going to hurt you as such. And what you're able to do, because the overall FFB signal is turned up, so too is the car feedback, the actual loading of the tire and all of that. So that's the point. That's the point. That's what you're trying to get to. The useful information in the FFB, and dial down the effects, if you like, or the stuff that isn't really useful. You still want to feel it because it's part of the enjoyment, but yeah, it's not as important, I guess, as, you know, other things in the FFB signal. But anyway, guys, we'll leave it there. I won't waffle on too much. Hopefully this helps you, and yeah, see you on track, and leave it there till the next one. Cheers.
No way.